Chapter 23. Ariana, Point of View. It was the worst 1 hour of my life. I never felt this miserable. I watched as the guard carries a half-conscious Alistair somewhere. Where are they taking him? I asked Vicus, who was looking devastated.
To the Deterior prison. He is to remain in that prison for the whole night,
he said as I looked at him in worry. Somehow I feel there is more to it.
A Deterior prison is filled with linings and scents of a flower called Casian. Did you notice that the ones who took him are not wizards, but shifter? It's because Casian is poison to the wizards,
he said as my eyes widened. Are they trying to kill him? I asked as I stood up in disbelief.
Casian doesn't kill a wizard unless it is eaten or mixed in blood. It makes a wizard tired and weak. It makes them feel pain and their body as a burden,
he said. I need to talk to the elders, I suddenly said, but he grabbed my hand.
No, don't you see? You should never interrupt a punishment. If not, they can impose more on both you and him,
he said as I stared at him. But I just want to see if he is okay, I said as he looked at me sadly. I will give you 15 minutes. A voice from behind made me jump in shock.
Elder Vitalia,
Vicus said as he bowed and greeted her. Lord Vicus, she replied back with the same gesture. What the others suggest as a punishment for King Alistair is very wrong. I was opposed it, but unfortunately majority was not in my side. 1,020 whips with Aloha are almost similar to painful death, even for a powerful king as himself. And adding a Deterior prison? She scoffed as I quickly glanced at Vicus. I will give you 15 minutes to talk to him. Please, give him courage and strength. He will be a bit determining to go through it if he knows that you are waiting for him, she said, as I nodded eagerly. Yes, please take me to him, I begged as she smiled at me. You do love him. I can see it in your eyes, she said as I froze. Do I? Come, she said, seeing me stop in my track. I walked with her to the direction Alistair was dragged. Vicus closely behind us. This is as far as we can go, she said as she looked at me. This is Elias. He is a werewolf. He will take you to him, she said as I nodded.
Please come, my queen,
he said as I took a deep breath and followed him. We walked through the dark tunnel, only lit with fire lamps. There were many rooms, but they were empty. Unlike the prison in Earth, which has jail bars, this was covered with a magic wall, which was white and somewhat transparent.
King Alistair, you have a visitor for a time span of 10 minutes,
Elias suddenly said, before bowing to me and walking away. Alistair? I called as I walked to the transparent wall.
Aria?
He said as I grasped. He looked different. His skin color was now a very light blue, and his eyes were glowing blue. What happened? I asked, worried as he gave me a sad smile.
The effect of the Casian flower. It will make me vulnerable, thus exposing my true power,
he said as he stood up in difficulty. I'm sorry, I said as he shook his head. He walked up to me and put his hand on the transparent wall. My hand, on its own, moved to the same place.
Never be sorry. It was my decision,
he said, smiling at me. Are you all right? I asked as I stared at his glowing blue eyes.
Just a bit weak and in pain,
he said as I raised my eyebrow. A little? I asked as he let out a weak laugh.
Okay, a lot. But I can withstand it. I am the powerful king,
he said as I shook my head. In pain, and still you never fail to praise yourself, I said as he put his forehead on the wall.
Why did you come there?
He asked, as I looked at him expectantly. I wanted to see you. Elder Vitalia gave me permission to come here. I wanted to make sure you are all right, I said, as he looked at me with void eyes.
Does that mean you have feelings for me?
He asked, as I frowned and stared at him. I don't know. I really don't know. When I heard you were being punished, I first thought it was guilt, but I don't know. When each time that whip touched your skin, I felt pain, and I felt all these emotions. It was different emotion. I have never felt so miserable. I was so willing to take the pain instead. My own action is confusing me. I said, but stopped as he looked down at me, smiling. Why are you smiling? I frowned, confused.
Thank you,
He said, as I stared at him, even more confused. Huh? I said, as he looked lovingly at me.
I am happy.
He said, as the guard came to me. I looked at him with expectation, wanting to have just a few more minutes.
I'm sorry, Your Highness, but I can't give you more time.
He said, as I sighed.
Go. I will stay strong for you and Noah.
He said, as the guard directed me to walk. As I walked out, I looked back at him as he kept staring at me. I love you, he mouthed, as my heart beat 10 times faster. Is this what being loved feels like? Chapter 24. Ariana, point of view. Why is Papa not waking up? Noah asked me, as he stared at his unconscious father. Alistair was pale, his eyes closed. His breathing was barely visible, and if it wasn't for the weird blue light shining in his body, we could have think he is dead. According to Vicus, this was how wizards self-heals. They project themselves to their powers. Papa is just tired and sleeping. He will wake up soon, baby, I said, as he nodded, still staring at his father.
I knew those elders were misusing their powers. I knew they wanted to show their importance by giving even the king punishment for defying them. But who would have thought they would increase the intensity of the Casian sent in the jail?
Vicus said, his voice sounding deadly. But it is now backfiring them. Many people are protesting against the excessive power of the elders. They are shouting for justice and asking them to go through the ritual, Hayla said, as I looked at her, confused. Ritual? I asked, as she nodded. The ritual of obsidian. It is a test for the royal position to face when in doubts. The royal who has lost the trust of the people will go through a ritual test, where our Lord, Vamir, will decide whether that person is worthy. If he is worthy, he will still have the mark of their position. If not, the mark will disappear and appear on the body of the next worthy, she said, as I nodded.
Every royal has a mark defining their position. Alistair and Noah have the royal mark of ruler on their neck. Hayla and I have our mark of the protector to the crown,
he said, as both of them showed their wrist. The wrist was inked with a design that looks like a sword with a blue swirl around it.
We are chosen by the great Lord Vamir to protect the throne, and we will even give you our lives,
he said, as I smiled and nodded.
I know we can trust you both with our lives,
a familiar voice suddenly said, as my head snapped to the person lying on the bed. Alistair? I shouted happily. Papa! Noah shouted, as he jumped from me to his father.
Oof!
He grasped, as Noah landed on top of his stomach. We all laughed as he patted and kissed his head. Papa, you're awake! You didn't wake up, he said, as the other nodded his head.
I'm sorry I worried you, baby boy,
he said, before looking at me. Say sorry to Mommy, too. Mommy was crying. He gave me a small, yet a heart-dropping smile, making me blush and look away.
I'm sorry I made you cry, Arya.
he said, as I blushed even more. It's okay, I murmured, before trying to secretly glance at him. Well, at least that was what I was trying to do. He caught my eyes and smirked at my attempt as I suddenly stood up. I bet you are hungry. I'll go get the food prepared, I said as he laughed. There is no need of that, Arya, Hayla said as she waved her hands in the air. The food we prepared appeared in front of Alistair, along with a wooden bed table. Food prepared by Queen Ariana's hand. Today on menu is steak and macaroni, she said, as I shook my head. She always says about the food when served, who made it and what it is. She even announces the juices or snacks made. Should you tell like that every time food is served? I asked, as she laughed. Yes, I must, was all she said. But it could be worse, right? I'm just glad she won't announce the whole making process.
Have you both eaten?
Alistair suddenly asked, taking my attention. I did. I ate steak as well. And I ate a bit ooh, he said cutely, trying to pronounce one of the wizard food.
Abuyona?
Alistair laughed as he nodded. Yes, that, he said shyly.
How was it?
Alistair asked as his son grinned. 10 out of 10, Noah said as he raised 10 fingers at his father.
I'm glad you like it,
he said proudly at his son.
Ariana didn't eat.
Vicus voiced as I glared at his smirking expression.
You didn't?
Alistair asked as I shyly nodded. I didn't, I murmured as he smiled at me.
Would you like to share?
He asked as I blushed. Come on, Noah. Give Papa and Mommy some time alone. Let's go play with Violet and Lucas, Hayla said. And before I could stop him, he ran to Hayla and all of them walked out, leaving us alone in the room. I looked around the room, trying my best not to make eye contact.
Look at me, beautiful,
he said, putting his hand under my chin. My chocolate brown eyes met with the blue ones, which still looked tired. Are you feeling better? I asked, as worry filled me.
Don't worry, love. I'm just a bit tired, but I'm sure I will be walking strong by tomorrow,
he said, as I nodded. Your people love you. They are protesting against the elders for giving you an unfair punishment, I said, as he nodded.
The elders are surely misusing their power. They may be the council, but I am still their king. They are still to obey me, and I will deal with them properly. Probably make them go through the ritual, i.e., if the people request.
He said, thinking hard. Don't think now. You are still weak. They are already asking for making the elders go through the ritual. But now, eat and take rest, I said, as he smiled and nodded.